like to have your insight on the role of women during the liberation war of Bangladesh, 1971. So I would like to ask you, how did the use of conflict-related sexual violence, or CRSV, during the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War impact the overall strategy for the Pakistan military?
So you see, historically, this war-related sexual violence, it has been one of the, everlasting instrument and a tool of war since the very beginning of human civilization. So in what happened in 1971 and what Pakistan did in this territory, they did, nothing new, but they have basically repeated the same old thing. But I guess the overall impact of this sex-related, war violence, they basically propelled the Pakistani forces to make mistake, because you never, you don't dare playing with the sentiment of an entire nation. So when you attack the very sensitive part of their, personal life, individual life, so it is very much expected and obvious that they will, blow up their, all sentiments and engage them in further fight. So they made mistake, and there was this international coverage of this sort of news that actually forced Pakistani government to face international, questions from the international bodies, and that also minimized their acceptance in the international arena. If they had not committed this sort of crime, if they managed to operate their war in any other manner except this, maybe they would have managed to get some international acceptance from outside world, labeling it as an internal matter of Pakistan, and tagging it as a civil war between two parts of the nation. So these are the things that actually forced them to lose the war, in my opinion.
My next question would be, like, despite the horrific experience of the mass sexual violence, many Bangladeshi women actually actively participated in the war effort, either directly or indirectly, be it as a combatant or serving as an aide, as a nurse, or giving shelter to the liberation war fighters. So what factors do you think that motivated them to overcome this trauma and contribute to the cause?
When you are in a war, you have actually nothing to lose. I would not say we had all the omens of progressive nature back in that time. So they had their own limitations, societal, economical, and other, burdens that actually forced them to stay at home. And of course, given the societal context of our country, in 1971, you certainly cannot compare to 2024 with 1971. So the situation was a bit different. So at one point, they were seeing that their own kind were getting raped, their loved ones getting killed, be it their son, their father, their husband, or their brothers, or their friends. So these are the things that engaged them to, to participate in this war and have their fair share of stakes, because maybe, unlike men, they could not fight on ground to such extent, but they actually helped those men to fight on ground so that they can take care of other things, planning or their food, or arranging, communicating information. So their stake and their interest and their contribution is beyond explanation. And without them, there are a lot of things that the forces, they would not be able to do. You cannot actually judge a particular person's contribution in a war based on his on-ground contribution. There are other things that happens outside. Those are the things where these women actually contributed a lot by aiding those men or other acquaintances to engage further on war ground. Despite this, restraint, and despite all these troubles in their path, somehow their kind, they managed to, get into the war and claimed their, fair share of contribution. And that actually led us to this victory. I think we are still in a position to, acknowledge their contribution in a positive way.
So, having actually discussed about the women's role in 1971 and the difference between the societal aspect of 1971 and now, after 53 years, in 2024. Do you believe that the role of women in 1971 actually inspired the women of the after post-liberation war society or history of Bangladesh ever since till 2024?
So the first thing that they brought after the war, that the very first change, I would say, is to bring the notion that we are equal. So it was not in men's comprehension that women could do things like war or participate in war affairs. So that was the change of perception that they brought. So after the liberation war, we got to see that in our policy making, in our state affairs, in our day-to-day policy changing, policy making issues, the participation of women was, I mean, pretty much more than what was, I mean, before 1971. So these liberation war actually brought them on the very front where actually they need to have their representatives. So they need, I mean, women to represent the interest of women. And after then, so no one is there to, I mean, question the contribution of women, I mean, or their capacity. So these actually inspired the new generation. So these are very groundbreaking, steps taken by our women back in 1971.
You have already shed light on the women's contribution. Do you think it was actually triggered them, the mass violence, or it was a response to what happening to them? I mean, some actually argue it may have inadvertently spurred women to join the resistance. So do you believe that mass rape served as a trigger for women's participation, or was it a reaction against the violations and oppression?
I guess it's a combination of both. In my opinion, we cannot, cherry pick one of these. Two, whether it was a reaction or whether it was, the fact that they were being victimized and they are being raped by Pakistani soldiers and officers. So I guess it was a combination of both of these things. So at one point they were getting raped by these people, and on the other hand, they were having this, sense of deprivation, same as their brothers or same as their counterparts. So they had this feeling that they need to step in. They did not, take their shelter at home. They were not scared like the rest of us. They actually managed to fight. And to be honest, not all men fought in that war. So in that sense, we cannot, label all the men as fighters back then. Both of these parties, had their equal share in managing the war. So yes, it was both. At least, in my opinion, they hated what Pakistani oppressors were doing. At the same time, some of them resisted by, offering their services in the war.
So international recognition of 1971 war crimes, particularly the sexual related violence, has been limited. And what are some of the biggest challenges do you believe in achieving this recognition and holding the perpetrators accountable?
The very problem lies with the recognition process. It's more of a political part than of a legal one. So it's not entirely a question of legality. So when the perpetrators acknowledges that yes, there was this thing and this occurred from my predecessors, and I am sorry for what they did on behalf of my country, I am sorry, then the acknowledgement part is done. So when you acknowledge a particular thing, recognition process starts. Whenever occasion comes, you get to remember them, you get to remember their contribution on a particular day. So our government has tried at least 1,000 times, but if the perpetrator country does not respond to your claim, and if they try to label it, in something else like civil war or internal problem, then you can really question their intention, whether they want to acknowledge their previous crime or not. And another problem lies with the recognition process is that there are a lot of international factors, international bodies involved in the entire process. So you cannot put much pressure on the actors when a country is being questioned for its own treatment to other people in his territory. You certainly cannot expect that country to be an advocate in your cause, because if that country advocates for you, then other countries will have the same opportunity to question that other country. That another thing is the, I mean, accountability of perpetrators. I mean, if I'm not wrong, many of them already died. Some of the, accusation, there will not be any sort of, accountable persons. You cannot name them, because the persons who were victimized, they are not surviving at this moment. After all these years, they are not in a state to recognize them as well. So those collaborators, those who aided, those who, were Bengalis but who aided the Pakistani soldiers, Pakistani officers to commit the crimes, they were brought to, justice, and the process is still continuing. But those who are living in Pakistan, who are outside Bangladesh, I don't think it is very much possible, due to the, existing international, system, to bring them accountable and to, to bring them under justice.
What message, do you think the story of Bangladeshi women's resistance in 1971 holds for future generations, particularly regarding the importance of women empowerment and the fight against sexual violence in conflict, be it in Bangladesh and in the other part of the world that we are witnessing at this moment?
This is where we need to work more, because in our society, women need to engage more in politics. And when I say politics, I mean they need to engage more on policymaking level, because ultimately it's the policymakers who bring, real changes. So we need to make sure their participation, and at the same time, we need to make sure that our women, they are given enough and adequate opportunities to get educated on these issues. For our future generation, it should hold a great importance, because this is not a matter of spirit only, this is a matter of great pride. These sacrifices, they might not be, easy to talk on. They might include some, traumatizing incidents, past traumatic experiences. At the same time, one thing is for sure, that these incidents actually, made us look back, and through that we realize how, ferocious and how brave our women were. So these will certainly keep, motivating our further generations, including our generation. And at the same time, these needs to be circulated in such a manner so that no one can ever question that whether we have taken enough steps to, impart education on our upcoming generation. So these needs to be included in our general education.
Having said about the education, we are at the very last point of our interview. In your opinion, what role can educations and initiatives like GHRTV, Global Human Rights Defense, how can this kind of initiatives actually play the role in preserving the memory of wars atrocities, particularly the experiences of women, and promoting awareness to prevent future occurrences?
These are the stakeholders, these agencies are the stakeholders outside the government, outside the UN bodies. So I think these institutions should be more vocal on international platform for those who are actually suffering and who already suffered. So by these, we can definitely put some pressure on perpetrating countries, and at the same time, the world will get a message that if the countries who, or the autocrats or the rulers who have these tendencies going on their mind, that time will not go that easily, because this time the international structure, the stakeholders, many actors in this entire gameplay, where I cannot just simply go scot-free. So in that way, the GHRD should be more vocal, and I hope they are already making the difference. You see, in genocidal studies, the remembrance process, the memories, the preservation of, memories, the preservation of the sacrifices, this is given the highest importance, because after the genocide ends, you have nothing but this remnant memories. If you do not preserve them, no one, after a certain time, no one will, remember about what you have or your predecessor have gone through, and your entire contribution is forgotten. and by that the sacrifice is forgotten, you have shed your blood, your memory is forgotten, no one acknowledge your actual sufferings, the entire, I mean, event is like it's nothing happened. So the way you are making the digital archive, it will help the the entire world to be a witness of, I mean sufferings of different people's or communities' memory. So certainly we can expect this is really one of a kind initiative, and certainly it will help the other people, the upcoming generation, to get their access to these sort of things, and to know more about the sufferings, the history, the trauma, and other associated things with the genocidal events.